The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the host and guest and do not reflect the opinions or policies of the station, its owners, or its advertisers. All content should be considered editorial in nature. Listener discretion is advised.
Recorded live from the radio studios of WFAY and WMRV, Androlonis Media presents Cumberland County's smartest hour of talk radio. Welcome back to another edition of the Carolina Cabinet.
Well, everyone, good morning and welcome. I'm Peter Pappas, here with the Carolina Cabinet. I'll be your host this morning. We are proud to be the only homegrown conservative talk radio show in the region, and we know this is the smartest hour of radio. Joining me in studio this morning, Pastor Joshua Goodman.
Yeah. I had to give Bishop a shout out.
Got to give him a shout out since old boy can't be here.
Good morning, everybody.
And welcoming special guest, sitting Councilman Mario Benevente.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate y'all having me.
Good morning,
Welcome.
sir. So, as we dive into our show, we appreciate you tuning in and spending time with us this morning. Please take a moment to like, share, or follow us on Facebook. And you can search for us at thecarolinacabinet.com or your favorite podcast broadcaster.
We are everywhere.
With that, don't go far. We'll be right back.
Since 2012, Joshua Goodman has been the senior pastor at the Cliffdale Christian Center, a dynamic church and ministry located in West Fayetteville. Join our friend Pastor Goodman for a podcast or a live sermon in person at 6427 Cliffdale Road. Now, for today's good news, here is Joshua Goodman.
Good morning from the All-American City. This is Pastor Josh, and have I got some good news for you. In a time when so many want to unpack, talk about, and discuss all the problems, circumstances, and situations, all the negative junk, I'm here to give you some good news. Well, at first, it may not be that good. This world, friends, is filled with shifting sand. I mean, wars, right? Middle East, Russia, Ukraine. We got Republican, Democrat, Independent. We've got protest riots. I mean, nightly news is stacked full of depressing stuff. And sometimes it would be so easy to get overwhelmed by all the stuff. Jesus writes this as an encouragement to us in Matthew chapter 7, 24 through 27. He says this, he says, "Therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, I will liken him unto a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain descended, the floods came, the winds blew and beat on the house, and it did not fall, for it was founded on the rock. But everyone who hears these sayings of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rains descended, the floods came, the winds blew and beat on the house, and it fell. And great was its fall." Friends, 1 plus 1 will always equal 2. 2 plus 2 will always equal 4. And those who hear these words of his and put them into practice, their life will always stand in the storms. The rains will always descend, the floods will always rise, and the winds will always blow and beat against that life, and yet it will stand. There will always be wars. There's always going to be fights, dissensions. But the foolish, the silly individual, number one, does not anticipate and expect and does not make the proper arrangements. What do I mean by that? I mean, if you keep doing the same stuff over and over again, well, that is literally the definition of crazy. So if what you are working on is not working, you got to try something different. If you begin to build on the rock, you can expect much different outcomes. You can expect to be able to stand in the midst of the storm. How does one build their life on the rock, you ask? By hearing his words and doing him. What are those words? Well, Jesus said to seek first my kingdom, and all these things would be added unto you. He said to love your enemies. He also said to love your neighbor and to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. And my friend, if you can put those things into practice, there's no storm that'll take you down. This is Pastor Josh, and that is your good news.
The cancel culture is not welcome here. You're listening to the Conservative Carolina Cabinet, Eastern North Carolina's most offensive talk show to the freeloading left.
Welcome back. I'm your host, Peter Pappas, here
Hello,
in the
hello.
studio with Pastor Josh
Whoop, whoop.
and with Sitting Council Member Mario Benevente, District 3, right?
That's right.
Okay. You know, ever since I ran, I kind of forget where y'all sit now. I paid attention to commissioner stuff, and then I kind of just forgot about city council. It's just a lot. So we go around the room first.
Yep.
What have we been up to? So, Pastor Josh, you want to take it away? What been up to the last week? 'Cause,
doggy.
we're involved. So.
Yeah, I spent the week at the beach.
Oh,
Not
okay.
with
The
just
rough
my wife
life.
and kids.
Okay, yeah.
But with my sister and her kids. Mm-hmm. And what's the old saying? Fish goes bad after 3 days, so do, live-in guests. It's interesting because me and my sister have very different political opinions. And in the past, I've never tried to keep the peace, right? I've always full-on discussion, but this time I was like, look, let's just be cool, my baby. Let's just get along, And so she would drop her things, and I'm like, yeah, okay. Let's. I'm gonna keep the peace. I'm not gonna press you on those things. And then spending a week in a 2-bedroom apartment with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think, kids. Wow,
yeah, that'll test.
It'll test the strongest of men, And so
I
love my
listen
sister.
to some of your own good news.
Yes. I love my sister. I love her kids, and we had a great time. And I was glad to get home.
Isn't that the good thing about nieces and nephews? They go with.
They go. Yep.
Yeah.
So. Had the chance to get some sun, get in the surf, do the things I do. Brought my nieces and nephews down to Huntington Beach, which has all the alligators, and so I got to let them see alligators for the first time. And
you thought about feeding one?
Yeah. Try to pet that one. He looks friendly. So it was a fun-filled week, but it was good to get back home and sleep in my own bed.
Well, and here I am, not vacationing, not doing anything, forgetting that it's summer. I should probably get out of town a little bit.
Yep.
So. Well, I had a pretty busy week. I know not as busy as Councilman Benevente over here, but I went to a special city council meeting on last Tuesday, I believe. The mayor announced the vision, what was it, 2050?
It was a state of the city type.
Right. Okay, so it was a
2050 vision. Vision to going into 2050 or something, wasn't it? Yeah.
Well, we went and, I was like, well, that sounded like a campaign speech to me.
Yeah.
And because I was expecting to go there and say, hey, we have an announcement for PwC is going to build a power plant, or the way it was kind of going. And then I was like, okay. I mean, I like hearing, that's fine. Mm-hmm. Okay. But anyway, so I went to that one. And then I believe Wednesday was the community thing for Blunt and Gillespie development. There's like 9 acres of land that the city has that they don't know what they want to do with yet.
Okay.
But we have consultants that came in and they're like, look, you can have apartments that look like this. You can have retail that looks like that. And they wanted people to vote on it. And I think, how many more meetings do you think are going to be on that, Mario?
Yeah, that was
before?
the very, very first one. So I think we've got a long
So
way to go.
we're at the very beginning of a long thing. So, yeah, if you missed it, there'll be other chances.
Yeah,
that's what I'm trying to get at. It's not like you missed the
chances.
one meeting
No,
and
no,
that's
no.
it.
Yeah.
But there was there was electeds there, and there was past electeds there, too. Mr. Floyd was there.
Oh, really?
People are interested in the future of our community. It's good to see that coming out on a rainy Wednesday night.
Yeah.
I did, and this is how I got our guest for today, was I went to the No Kings protest on Saturday.
How I did not go. I saw clips of it online, but what I heard, but I can't always
There's
rely.
varying numbers of how many people were there. I think by the time I got there on my Greek time, it was like 175 to 250 people still in Linear Park, but I feel like I saw the photos from down Hay Street. And Mara, you can chime in here. I mean,
just going off the observers' numbers, they kind of marched along with them.
They
I wasn't
said
there for that
500
part.
though.
Yeah, over 500.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I want a pastor's opinion on that, because you know how to count people in the audience.
Yeah.
You know how many plates to stick around.
So you know how they have Greek time, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
There's actually pastors counting, and that's something that is it's like oh yeah, if there's 15 people, then there was really 200. Mm-hmm, that's how pastors count.
Well,
it's called evangelical counting.
Look, everybody, and I was joking with Mario on Saturday. I said, what's the barometer of a successful protest? Is nothing's on fire, nothing's.
Oh, yeah.
They cleaned up after themselves.
That's cool.
They did police their own areas. I mean, they did what a protest should be.
Mm-hmm.
They went, they saw,
they
protested, they chanted, they did whatever, and they got out.
Yeah.
So anyway, how
did that go? And I'll ask you more, because but nationwide, do you think the do you think that the movement got the expected turnout?
I think some numbers that I've seen where there were over 2,000 independent occasions, and I think they said somewhere, and over 2 million people participated. I'm not really sure, who's calculating all of that. But, when it comes to demonstrations like that, to me, it kind of makes me want to talk about the logic behind petitions, right? A petition, if you have 100 names on it and you put it, you claim that you're going to put it in front of an elected and it's going to sway them, I don't think that's really the power in the petition. The power in the petition is really that you've got the contact information for 100 people who are now, saying that they are interested in what you're sort of working with and what you're working on, and organizing those people beyond just that signature, beyond just that particular petition is really what you're trying to leverage. So, I think there were several organizations that tried to do that. There was to say that, number one, if you felt like, if you just go off the Facebook comments alone, that you might believe, wow, Fayetteville really doesn't have a place for, folks who think and feel this way. Well, and then you would go in person to an occasion like this and say, actually, there are plenty, in fact. And so, how do you sort of go beyond just the one-day occasion? How do you then come back again to regular meetings with different
organize and
exactly
and
right.
Start doing stuff.
So I think when you talk about what is the measure of a good demonstration is how many people you sort of activate moving forward to participate, and a number of wonderful things going on. There was folks there with a community garden that said, hey, we've got to be able to get access to fresh food ourselves, if this government decides to tumble down. And so, that's a practical thing. People learning how to start their own sort of gardens in their own backyards. That's a wonderful thing for people to get involved with. There's a number of organizations, like I said, that kind of came up and shared, some senior ladies organizations, the Now Women. I'm sure you guys have heard of them. They were a really big part of organizing this. And you can imagine those folks are well represented, and again, now they have a connection point of who they can continue to meet with on a regular basis.
And that's one of the areas that I can't speak specifically to this one. I can speak Christian things, but oftentimes, it's about the event, and the organizers fail to follow up in a good way.
That's right. In a meaningful way.
In a meaningful way,
right.
Yeah. It's like, we met, we put 5,000 people in the car.
Right.
That's nice. Oh yeah, we're done. But really, it's kind of short-sighted.
It's a lost opportunity
That's
for
right.
grassroots. You hear grassroots. Well, you can't get any grassier than that. I mean,
that's right.
So you think a lot of these times people get together and they don't follow up with the
missed opportunity
people.
Yes, and then not only that, but I mean, sometimes it takes people several times before they become, regulars at the church, regulars at the restaurant, right? So, I think the more often you can kind of have opportunities like this for people to start to recognize what it really means to go beyond just the social media post, go beyond just sort of the passive stuff, to get really activated and to become a part of a community organization. I mean, that let's be honest, is a tenth of the population, maybe less. If we're lucky, especially if you start looking at voter turnout details, we're talking about trying to connect more and more people to, again, civic orgs, just different great things that are happening around the community. Because honestly, I think that's what makes you want to love your city and love your hometown is when you've got reasons to want to get involved. You're stuck in the house, you're stuck online in the sort of parasocial world of social media. And that's never enough. And that's
antisocial.
Well,
indeed.
Yeah, I know that we haven't gone directly into Mario's segment yet, that we're going to talk about a couple more things. Right. No, you're good. But that's one thing I love about you, because any city events, I always see you there. Went to France with you, represented the city.
That's amazing.
And so they're showing up, and that's cool for me, because I recognize who's like-minded.
Well, what did I tell you? Like when they wanted to change the terms from 2 to 4 years, what was my biggest gripe was you never stop campaigning if you're a local elected.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I don't want to put like you were campaighning at the thing, but that's you just being involved
in the community
is the nature of campaigning.
Yeah, that should be a prerequisite.
They're not really exclusive of one another.
That's right.
You're just going to these things. You're putting your face. You're
part
showing
of the
that this is my priority. I'm here.
Yep.
I don't know if I can change much, but I'm here.
But I'm here.
Doing my best. Always doing your best.
Doing my best. So, but yeah, no. So, look, I don't agree with the majority of what was going on. I'm on somebody's camera though, because some dude kept following me with the video.
Oh, I missed that.
Well, you saw how threatening I looked. I was in
not at all.
my green polo and shorts with my white pasty legs, and I'm like going up and down. And I was just so I did it on behalf of the cabinet, just so that we could have some photos and video to share. Yep. And by your recommendation, I went and spoke to the people in that tent, the security type folks.
Good.
I've emailed them, and also hopefully we'll get them on the show.
Those are some fun folks.
They seem pretty cool.
Yeah.
And one guy was from Fayetteville,
right?
So he's like, "Yeah, I've seen your name before." I'm like, "Okay,
very cool."
Not on that site, hopefully, but yeah. But you know, I think whether I agreed with him or not, I tried to keep a respectful distance.
Yep.
I took my pictures, whatever, and it wasn't like I'm trying to tell on them.
No.
I probably should get me a credential or something.
Right.
Be like, no, I'm cool, man. I'm not
press.
But look, there were people in the audience that I knew.
Yeah.
And they
have conversations
they
with.
embarrassed the heck out of me because they're like, Peter. I was like, shush, shush. You know, well, I didn't want them to bring attention to themselves. But anyway, I as far as demonstration or I'll call it protest. You call it demonstration. As far as that goes, I think they did a good job.
Yeah.
And
there's a lot to be said for that.
I mean, as
being
long
able
as
to speak your voice,
and as long as nobody gets hurt or nothing gets broke, I think you're good. So keep doing it. So I already mentioned the mayor's announcement.
Let's delve into that because I'd like to bring Mario in because I'm intrigued by it. Right, the mayor made the announcement. You know that he will not seek reelection.
Right.
Reelection. We have your name in the hat.
That's right.
Kathy Jensen has her name in the hat, and Frankie
Freddie Dela Cruz.
Freddie Dela Cruz. Is that all who has their hat or their name?
So we do have another one, Paul Williams.
Okay.
He is joining us on next week. I think he's coming on.
Okay.
Now Paul is. He's been on city council before a couple times, I believe, in the 90s.
Okay.
But Paul has experienced a lot of personal trauma in the last, I know this year, and I don't know when his other daughter had passed. So he's been through a lot. And I think we discussed that Saturday too. So we're going to let him tell his story.
Yeah.
But he definitely, if you got the bone, he's got the pick.
Yeah.
When it comes to county affairs and things like that. So he's going to be, he seems to be a smart guy, be a good guest, and I look forward to having him on here. But that's it. You got the 4.
So, I was discussing with Peter because I don't know if Mayor Colvin, Mitch, if he is done with his political career. If he's, it could be he's like, I've done this for whatever 20 years. I'm good, right? He hasn't, to the best of my knowledge, he has not announced any future plans yet.
I'm betting he's going to continue to.
I think he is.
He's too young to retire.
That's Yeah.
And even sometimes when they get too old, they don't retire. So
we
might have there might be
typical,
that.
I think.
Yeah, that's more typical. But I don't think we've seen the last of Mayor Colvin.
No. What part do you think, Mario, is his? It's not recommendation, endorsement. How important do you think his endorsement's going to be?
Well, I don't expect one. I'd actually spoken to him before I announced, just as a kind of, all hands on the
courtesy,
table, all cards
courtesy,
on the table. Exactly right. And he was kind enough to actually sit down with me and talk about that. And I kind of brought it up in a teasing way, saying that, well, Kathy's going to expect you to be walking her up and down all the neighborhood watches and all this and that. That's what she keeps telling everybody. And he said, no, that's not his style. That's not, and I agree with him that really that kind of support's not yours to give, right?
Yeah.
And I would say that, any individual's got to go out and get that sort of buy-in from the community on their own. So I don't anticipate him coming out with any sort of strong endorsement. I think it's really going to be up to the individual, candidates to go out there and say, to the
beat
people.
The street,
to
beat
meet
the street.
The people where they are.
Yeah.
And I think the whole idea of an endorsement at the local level anyway, it's more of a state, federal thing that you'd see endorsements of electeds that, I think locally, I think even I had that discussion with Mayor Colvin a couple of years ago that he's
not
like, no, everybody's running their own campaign.
That's right.
Yeah.
So let everybody stand on their own.
Yeah.
And I think they should because
I agree.
the campaining doesn't stop.
No. And it's discussions that we've had, work versus money, when it comes to campaigning. Could somebody with, only a couple $1,000s even viably put their name in the hat and, past individuals, look, if you're willing to do the work, that's what it's going to come down to, knocking on those doors, having those conversations, those kind of things. And I think I agree with it, but I'm not a politician.
It's a mixture of sweat equity versus dollars.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Have you actively started, hardcore campaigning, like knocking on doors?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh man, he made like a hit video and everything.
Really?
No. Yeah, when we launched back in April, we let folks know how seriously we're going to be taking this race. And I think that's going to be the biggest difference maker in our campaign versus anyone else's. I don't think anyone else has really got the street team and the ability to pound the pavement like we do. So we've been on the west side of Fayetteville where, in my side of District 3, we're thinking about closer to Fayetteville State, East Smith area, area outside of Jack Britt, Cliffdale, my reach probably hasn't arrived there, so much, but we've been knocking doors out there for the past several weeks, and it's been, a wonderful reception thus far. It's
on
just,
the west side.
Yes.
Because the west side's my side. I'm
there
7,
Absolutely. So we went in 6, making our way to 7 and 8. And then, of course, ultimately, when it comes to, I think, the local races, people haven't seen that level of sort of campaigning. I think traditionally when it comes to municipal elections, you're kind of going off of name recognition. You're kind of going off of time on the saddle. And really, I think my election, when we took out an incumbent myself, with just 6 votes, the expectation was not that I was going to win that first race, but we, I think, changed the dynamic of what it's going to take to be able to, and again, it's not just me. I think in 2025, you got to believe that, the social media stuff, it matters, the door knocking, it matters.
So I've used your original campaign as an example.
Sure.
You and Grilly Mitchell, 6 votes, he lost by 1 vote. Recently in the last Hope Meals,
I think so.
So I use those as examples when I talk about participation mattering and your vote does count, because we come down to 6, 5, 10.
Yeah,
I'll even dial it back to the primary when there was a handful of us. I barely made it out of the primary by Mr. Keys. Kieran was just 12 votes behind me. So, even that one was quite the margin.
Well, and that's why, again, we harp on participation.
Yes.
Everybody on Facebook, if you see generally how I respond to people once I get past the but, generally it's like, well, here's the link for city boards and commissions. Yeah. Or
do your
homework. Did you vote last election? It's like nobody, they'll admit, no, it doesn't count. Well, then shut up.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. You don't really have the right to complain if you're not willing to.
If you vote and your guy lost, fine. Yeah. But at least you did it.
Yeah.
Sure.
And we can check. We know if you voted or not.
Right.
It's public record.
It is.
So, but now I was trying to check on some loudmouth the other day, and I couldn't find him on the state board because they probably using a different name on Facebook. So I'm like, man, you got away from me.
But, a lot of people do that though because they want to keep their Facebook, separate.
I will find you eventually. We're going to pierce that. We're going to get there. So, but anyway, so definitely it's a ground game for you.
It is a ground game for us. We're going to try and do, everything we're supposed to, right? I mean, I tease my wife all the time and say, she's running for first lady as much as I'm running for mayor. And so, in her circles, she's doing what she can do. Rand and Gregory, the law firm that we're a part of, it's one that had that storied legacy of Senator Tony Rand, sort of really making an impact for our county for all those decades that he was in the state, as a state senator in the General Assembly. And so, we're really looking at this opportunity, especially now that Mayor Colvin's decided not to seek re-election, as a real opportunity for us to, be of service to in all the ways that our family has always participated in civic issues. That we kind of continue that tradition, and that it's up to us to go out there and get it. It's up to us to go out there and fight for it, and that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have just a couple minutes before I'm going to take a break.
Absolutely.
So why don't we? Well, Mari, I'm going to let you go ahead in a minute or two. So let's just start from scratch.
Yeah.
Tell us you and what brought you to filing for office this time.
Yeah, absolutely.
So go ahead.
So Mario Benevente, I've been serving y'all for past 2 terms as your councilman, and public safety issues have been my number one priority since I ran for council and now interested in running for mayor. I see it every single day in that Cumberland County Courthouse as an attorney, and I see where we start the policy at City Hall and whether or not it's actually working on the back end in the courtroom. And I got to tell you that there's a lot more that we can be doing, in particular when it comes to our juvenile matters. Chief Braden did a great job making sure that he could show us, statistically speaking, every measurable statistic shows that crime is going down, except one. Juvenile crime is the one that we cannot brag and say is going down. And we have a plan for that. Working in the juvenile courts myself, I know what these young people need when it comes to the kind of programming, care, and compassion that really all young people need.
Yeah.
They're just unfortunately living, in conditions, in an environment that they are not getting a lot of that. So the city can step up and do a lot more to bring about the kind of best practices that other communities have brought in, and they've seen 70% decreases in juvenile crime over the course of 5 years. And I think if we apply those same sort of programs here in the city of Fayetteville, we'll get the same benefit that they have.
So, not to get into a line of questions, we only have about a minute, but that you're talking maybe OCS, Office of Community Safety.
We've made a
things like that.
good jump just in my brief time of establishing an Office of Community Safety, and the whole concept there is exactly right. You know, we want to set up our law enforcement for success, and that includes making sure that they do their job, but the things that are out of their purview, that we have the supplemental comprehensive service to come in and take over for them.
Well, finding a director might be a good first step, but we'll get right back to that right when we come back. I'm just going to drop that one on
Yes,
you.
sir.
Have another cup of coffee and get fired up with the Carolina Cabinet, Eastern North Carolina's smartest conservative morning talk show. Free thinking, hard-hitting, truth-telling. You're listening to the Carolina Cabinet, Eastern North Carolina's answer to the radical left. Liberal media's blah, blah, blah. Welcome back to local conservative talk radio.
And welcome back to the Cabinet. I'm Peter Pappas here with Pastor Josh and Councilman Benevente.
Yes,
it's a pleasure to have you. So I just dropped a bomb on you. I was like, well, you know, maybe finding a leader for the OCS might go a long way.
It would.
But so Office of Community Safety, whether you agree or disagree, we have funding for it. So there's basically like a framework.
That's right. And there's been a lot of success, right? I mean, the city of Durham is the one we're modeling most after, where they decided, hey, we can identify 3 neighborhoods that could really see a lot more help, because we're seeing the 911 calls, but the follow-up and the follow-through is what's missing. And let's be honest, this little thing called the Constitution limits when law enforcement can get involved in people's lives until a law's been broken or someone's been hurt or they've hurt themselves. And we know that there's a lot of red flags before that happens.
Yeah.
And if there's an opportunity for, again, a city service to kind of work with families that we know are constantly having these kinds of issues, it'll be all the better in reducing call volumes, so that, you know, folks can, you know, that are trained to do the emergency stuff can stick to those emergencies, as opposed to kind of coming back.
Okay, so I want to clarify that, because that was a lot of angst, I think, over the Office of Community Safety being formed. Was, oh, you're going to send social workers to an emergency call, and, you know, you're sending out what's going to be a 25-year-old social worker unarmed.
Right.
So this is not that.
No, well, there's always triage that happens on a 911 call. And certainly you can imagine this is no different than a car accident. There's car accidents where, listen, you got to have everyone out there because it's a serious one. And then there's the fender bender, where the trained officer who really needs to be out responding to actual calls doesn't need to be spending the next hour and a half trading insurance information. So we've got those civilian, crash folks that'll come out. And again, it just kind of frees up the folks who are just a little bit more trained to focus on the more higher level issues to do so. And so similarly here, if we know that there is a community that is regularly facing certain issues, and again, you call 911, the cops show up, and I've heard this frustration from folks, but there wasn't anything for them to do in that moment. There's definitely a problem here. And this is where, again, some follow-up and some follow-through can happen before an actual act of maybe domestic violence happens or an actual act of abuse happens. You know, there's again, you know, some people who are dealing with mental health or maybe some addiction issues that they haven't hurt anyone just yet, but we know where this is going. And so having a licensed clinical social worker, a peer support specialist, maybe somebody who's been in that place before, and then, of course, an EMS person arriving in a van to just treat that person right then and there. We don't have to necessarily worry about getting them to a hospital, although, again, EMS person's on standby. If he needs to call the ambulance, here they come.
Well, okay, so we're going to have more people.
They come.
We're going to have more people saying, okay, we're going to evaluate you for mental health, but do we even have enough beds? I mean, don't we hit a capacity problem with where can we send them for
100%.
further help?
No, 100%. There's always going to be issues of capacity, but this is the ugly thing about capacity issues and government. Until you sort of break the mold, it doesn't come. You know, this is when people get frustrated with DOT and all this traffic that's coming. Well, and we don't want to build this new apartment complex because there's already so much traffic. Well, until you bring that apartment complex, DOT's not going to come until they really sort of break the traffic pattern, and then we have to act.
Well, I think citizens, we forget that the apartment complex wouldn't want to be there, or that restaurant wouldn't want to be there if the traffic was
bad.
That's right. So, you know, and unfortunately, if enough people get hurt at a certain intersection, then you get a light. or around the and unfortunately because
Right.
government is reactive.
That's right.
To what's
out
out
there. We're going to do the bare minimum at the last minute, more often than not, and because of that, again, just like you said, is there really all the follow through after that point? Because there does need to be potentially a bed or potentially a service provider to care for them beyond the immediacy, and the short answer is, do we have everything that we need for everybody in Cumberland County? Not necessarily. We are sort of fighting sometimes for services between the several counties that provide for our area, whether it's Communicare or some of these other organizations. But the more demand we create, the more.
And you think OCS will create more demand because we'll be identifying?
Not only, yes, the short answer is yes, but beyond identifying, we're actually diagnosing exactly what our issue is, because right now, it's sort of black and white. Is there a police issue? Is the law broken or not? That's it. And once it's addressed, we sort of, call it complete. But in reality, nothing was completed here.
No.
There is still very much a family struggling or a neighborhood suffering. And that healing really can only come when we kind of actually wrap around them with additional services. So what happened in Durham was that they turned this on in just 3 particular neighborhoods for certain hours of the day, for certain days of the week. And it got so popular, the law enforcement were so excited to be able to unload, some of these issues that they were constantly being called for, that it grew to a 24-hour service. It grew to a citywide service, and then the county stepped in and said, let's scale this up even bigger.
Yeah.
And so I'm very confident that what we have started in Fayetteville will grow accordingly over time.
Is it the city's? So one of the questions I have is, you're going to love this.
That's all right.
So is it the government's job to raise our children?
So I think it's the government's job to address any.
And I'm saying that the most adversarially way I can say it. But it's like, the more that we're offering services and all, it's like our reward as a community is that we get more problems, so at what point are we dependent on people to take personal responsibility?
Sure. Well, the way I look at it is more like we're already dealing with everyone's sort of difficulty or inability to address their personal issues. When you're not able to care for your child in a way that they end up busting into my car and taking my iPhone out of it,
Right.
we're already sort of dealing with it. The least expensive way, actually, and the most productive way to preventing them from ever doing that again to anybody else is actually to get inside that house, get them the in-home intensive care that they need, and that's really is what's going to make our community safer. The cost right now of just letting it sort of spill out into the criminal justice system, and God knows how much these attorneys and these judges sort of cost the taxpayer. Absolutely.
These attorneys
it's
in
true.
here,
It's true. I mean, I can tell you because I bill the county on a regular basis at an hourly rate. So, all of that cost is 10 times what it would be for us to just address the issue on the front end or sort of upstream.
Yeah.
So for me, it's just it's an obvious equation. The fiscally conservative thing to do is to think about some of those services up front.
Well, has anybody put it in those terms? I mean, I've been
I'm trying, sir.
I think it was about a year ago when they announced OCS. It was down at FSU. There was a big to-do.
There was.
And my opponent at the time didn't show up, and I took a picture of that. I was like, "There's a nameplate." But anyway, I'm not throwing shade at all over here. But it's been about a year, and nothing.
I would say longer than that, because even before it got to that point, there was a lot of arm twisting with just the mayor pro tem, and a majority of council. I think it failed 3 or 4 times before it even got to the point where we had enough support to get to that FSU meeting of the minds. And again, it is a change. It is a departure from our normal sort of way of addressing emergency issues. The police have had to sort of be a catch-all for just about everything for a long time. And Chief Brady would be one of the first ones to tell you, Mara, you're talking about all these reviews on our processes. If you do those reviews, you know who's going to end up looking kind of crazy? DSS. Social services.
Yeah.
Well, but now they were, so last year's meeting, it was county commission, city council, health department, I remember. Was DSS represented there?
They were represented. And again, it's sort of, you start to find out that the frustrations that maybe some people are having with law enforcement are wrongfully placed on them, that you actually find out that the real ones dropping the ball are these other entities that should have been stepping up all along, that who knew about these issues.
Are we talking about governmental, or are we talking about...
Governmental to begin with, and certainly, others, depending on whether or not the government's funding them. But that's the kind of fact-finding and sort of, deep dive that we have to do. We got to hold everyone accountable for not doing their job. But if we kind of keep saying that public safety is the exclusive realm of just the police, then all of a sudden they get over scrutinized and they get sort of expected to, why aren't you guys flying? Why aren't you guys swimming? Why aren't you guys doing all of these things that really you were never meant to do?
So I've shared with you in our time some of my personal story. I've got a daughter who is in jail, currently resides at Cumberland County Detention Center, was out at Hope County.
I'll bake her a cake.
Yeah, they won't let you. You can't even get in there. But mental health issue, addiction issues, these things. And so this past year for me has been an up close and personal at how the system can be greatly ineffective. Is not at least for her. There's as a parent, I'm looking for what if they let her out? Then where's she going to go?
That's right.
I can't bring her back into my house because I've got younger children,
right.
And so I have this is like my heartbeat. This for me it's something that it's something I'm very passionate about, and I never knew. It's not the courthouse's fault that they're unable to be effective with my daughter. They're loaded down. She'll sit for 3, 4, 5 months before anything begins to even transpire. And so, again, it's just one of the. I sat in Hope County Courthouse a number of times and didn't even get to see her. She wasn't even brought in before the judge. Just continued.
No, the system as it stands is not sustainable for anyone. And like you said, people who. We and again, I don't know your exact situation, but speaking a little bit more generally, we know what we need to do for folks that are struggling with addiction. We know exactly what they need. We know if we just gave them, sort of the prescription and followed it, there would be success.
Yeah.
But again, we're talking about a lot of folks. We're talking about a limited number of ability to invest into that issue. But again, I think failing to invest in that really just perpetuates.
I can tell you, it costs. Yeah. So she got, when her husband passed, she got a $400. He was military, $400,000. She gave $200 to his family, and she went through $200,000 within a year. Within a year,
right.
So what does every month her check? She gets one from the government. $1,200 gone. So
wow.
It's one of those things that the cost. Again, the vantage point perspective I have is huge. I would love to have been able to fix this.
Obviously,
a little closer to the front end,
Well, but just because we're going to have the OCS online doesn't mean we're going to be able to cure. We're not going to necessarily have the capacity right out of the gate.
That's right. And that's what I mean by it's going to, I think, reveal a lot of things.
Do you think you're going to start like Durham and a few neighborhoods?
That's exactly right.
Is that how they're going to deploy it?
That is the short answer is that's my hope. Right. We've already identified 3 areas that were worthy of ShotSpotter. Right. Because these were the areas considered statistically most ripe for the next instance of gun violence. So in my opinion, we've already got 3
hotspots.
Previously identified areas. Now, ultimately, the new director is going to say sort of what direction they want to go first or how they want to roll out. So, I have my hopes and dreams. We'll see what they end up kind of revealing to the council.
Okay.
And what will your if you're elected? Because like I said, I'm the novice here. I don't understand.
No, you're fine,
do you have? Does the mayor get a vote in decisions like that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you'll be able to,
he's 1 of 10.
1 of 10. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Stretch your influence, and obviously as a mayor you'll have more, because it won't be one sector of the city, but you'll have a broader scope.
Yeah. As much as I wish the entirety of city council operated a little bit more like 10 individual votes, it's hard to deny that in reality and practice, a lot of council members err on the side of where the mayor is.
Yeah.
And it's something that, I'm hoping that over time, we can kind of break free from that in a more equitable way. But certainly in the short term, my hope is that, hey, Mario is running on a very specific, platform. And if he's got a majority interest for the city, then perhaps that's a clue.
Then maybe that's
a clue that we want to see a little bit more investment in our social services and the way that we approach public safety here in the city. The way I've been phrasing it is we need a cure for crime in Fayetteville, and we've got to take a public health approach. Right now, we've got the emergency room, and we've got a great emergency room. That's the 911 folks. But once you've been to the emergency room for a little bit of a heart attack scare, you need to follow up with the cardiologist.
Yeah.
You need to follow up with the nutritionist, get on a heart-healthy diet.
Yeah.
You need to get up with the physical therapist about some exercise. You have to approach every other wing of that hospital so you do not end up back in the emergency
agreed.
room. Right now, that's all we are offering here as a city of Fayetteville is one wing of the hospital.
Right.
And I think if we have a few more comprehensive services, that will be a much safer community.
Okay, so let's shift to one of the questions, because I ran for commission and I'm at the chamber on the government relations.
Absolutely.
So we're very involved with the regulated clean water access in Cumberland County. But Fayetteville kind of holds a little more control over Fayetteville PWC than the county ever could. I mean, definitely it's a Fayetteville
compared
issue.
the two, absolutely.
So is there, as mayor, or is there, what can be done to get PWC to kind of work better with the county? I mean, is there any purview from the city council to?
So on paper, the answer is always by way of the appointment process to the board, to the PWC board, right? Ever since that sort of divorce that occurred in 2016 between PWC and the city of Fayetteville, our sort of direct influence has been severed, but we do appoint members of their board. Now, the way that it's been put to me, and again, this is the kind of radio station where I feel like, the inside baseball gets sort of said, the quiet part gets said out loud. A kind of indoctrination occurs quickly after folks are appointed to the board, and all of a sudden they're no longer City of Fayetteville appointed.
There's people on that board. I'm not going to pull any punches here, so I'll tell you right now, there's people on that board that don't belong there. Just because you're a former city councilman, somebody owes you a favor, you get appointed. That does not a good commissioner make.
No.
Okay? We need people that are answerable. And so what was the relationship? You mentioned the divorce in 2016. I wasn't so tuned in back then. So what was the relationship then with PwC and the city of Fayetteville?
So, if you ask somebody from PwC, they'd say that we were tired of being the city's piggy bank.
Right.
That perhaps the way we would sometimes lean on their profits to get us out of financial issues was to their detriment in expansion and sort of their mission. And ultimately, I think the North Carolina General Assembly agreed, and therefore our ability to sort of do anything with or direct in any way how they spend their money that they generate was ended. It was all now up to this PwC board of directors to be able to say exactly whether a CEO's plan for expansion was the best way to do it, or to and again, very specifically, they sort of pay a stipend or sort of an allowance back to the city, but it's a very static.
Well, as opposed to before, we were able to dip in when we needed for rainy day fund, but now it's a couple $1 million a year, something like that.
It's a very, very set in.
It's a fixed amount,
in the judge's order sort of way. And of course, we can ask for more sometimes when there's emergency sort of declarations called, and there's sort of a process for sort of emergency occasions, but it's very specific. It's not typical. But again, how we appoint board members matters. Are we hiring professionals, or are we hiring, perhaps like you said, Peter, politicians?
It's not even politicians, because we get accused of being that no matter what. But the thing is, just because of fealty, or you help somebody get the city council or whatever else, your career background doesn't justify you being in that seat. PwC is a multi-billion-dollar a year. I would imagine. I'm kind of. I didn't do my homework for that number, but I mean, this is a big organization, and if not for serving the citizens of Fayetteville, what the hell they need their profit for? See, that's my problem with it, is they have so much profit, they're able to build a whole building, like their administration building on Old Wilmington Road, cash.
That's true.
There's no debt on that building, which is great. I mean, I like it when a semi-governmental organization is paying their own bills.
They belong
to us. And what really chaps me is when I see them announce on Twitter and Facebook, we have the lowest rates on utility. Yeah, because you're the only one I can buy it from. So look, there's a lot of great people that work at PwC.
Incredible professionals there, don't get me wrong.
There are. Well, I took the citizen tour last 6 or 8 months ago, and that was pretty eye-opening.
They are incredibly proficient.
All the facilities we have at our, we even have a coal-fired plant.
I didn't know that.
We can't crank it up because Duke Energy doesn't let us.
Okay.
We're only allowed to crank it up if Duke Energy says, we're a little tight this month. So, but I think even if they fired it up full time, it wouldn't account for 10%.
So do we get all of our electricity from Duke?
We sure do.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Yeah, we're resellers, man.
Yeah, middlemen. And that's never...
We're doing retail here.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing. And we even sell water to Hope County.
Yeah.
Which we mentioned before. I'm still working on getting people from Hope County to come on here because they definitely got a bone to pick.
Oh, yeah.
I told you, when the Board of Realtors here gets together and says, we need to go to Hope County to a meeting and speak out against a development, You got to take a pause. Like, wait a minute. I thought realtors are supposed to want to build everything.
Yeah.
But because of the infrastructure out there has been so far outbuilt that there are, and PwC, I don't think will sell them more water.
No.
Anyway, I don't want to get off on that, but I just, so again, back to the mayor's speech, I was thinking, well, maybe he's going to announce we're going to take over, knowing what was going on in Hope County. Well, maybe I had all these possibilities in my brain. Like, okay, what's he going to announce? And state of the community. It's okay. It was a fancier video than a speech, but anyway. Okay, so PwC, what can you do? You think to, because the county's talking about 350 billion. No, 350 million. Jeez, I'm sorry. I got the wrong. The whole, well, so what I'm going to say is it's municipal. What they want to do is create municipal water in the county. And it puts us on par with Hope County, Robeson, Moore County that they had. They took advantage of the USDA grants in the 70s and 80s when they were all rural counties. But now we're not eligible for the money anymore because we're considered urban.
Yeah, urban.
So now they have this need about 350 million. Jesus. What do you think you can do from the city? I mean, to get PwC to cooperate.
Well, and like I said, it has everything to do with our one sort of tool in the toolbox, and that is appointment of these boards of commissioners. And I'm sure you've seen, from compared to any other board or commission, this is a completely different animal. We sort of stop everything, and we have our own sort of process that's kind of been developed. I know that it's a process that I think needs to be improved upon, because as you mentioned, we've had some, I think, incredible candidates come through before. Folks that were incredibly worthy, either because of their professional experience or their ties to the community that I think warranted them a position. It's unfortunately become more of a badge, sort of a political appointment, sort of like
it's a thing of fealty.
There you go. You become the ambassador to a very nice country, right? Where you can vacation on the weekends. Well,
now, do we pay those commissioners? They don't get a stipend or anything, do they?
My understanding is that they do get some kind of stipend.
Okay.
I don't know if it's necessarily from the city of Fayetteville. Well, again, it kind of, I guess, ultimately is always from the city of Fayetteville. But I think that there is something set up through PwC that gets them paid.
How many people are on their board of commissioners?
I want to say 5.
Okay.
It's a tight group.
Yeah.
It's not huge.
But I agree. So what you said earlier was, our boards and commission process needs to be improved. I think as sitting on a board and commission, then I agree with you, because there are people that are on there. I hate to say it, for a free lunch, and it's like, hey, I could put this on my resume and all, because my time spent on human relations has been sparring with our director and budgetary issues that haven't been disclosed to me as a citizen. Yeah. And I got in trouble for emailing city council by, what did she say? Circumventing the chain of command. I said, well, I gave you 3 days to respond before I did what I did, But at any rate, I think as a citizen, it is up to you to sit on that board. If you get on that board, ask questions.
Yeah, be on the board.
On Civic Center Committee, Jamie McLaughlin is our chairperson. So she's sitting at the other end of the table. I'm at the one end. And whenever it goes to budgetary, she doesn't even bother asking, does anybody have questions? She looks right at me and says, okay, Mr. Pappas, what do you
what do you got?
I'm like, oh, because she saw me scribbling away really quickly.
Yeah.
Like, I questioned, we have about $11 million floating through the Coliseum or the Crown Complex, but we lose 3.2. So I want to know where we got from 11 to basically we $14 million difference. Yeah. But anyway, so appointments.
That's our one sort of tool at this point. I think beyond that, I'd be telling you just what you wanted to hear. There's one legitimate means and a method, and again, I think we've got to be very clear about what the city is wanting from you, right? As a particular appointee to that board, and I think that when we make those parts clear, because again, I think sometimes the appointment process has been kind of shrouded in a who's who, and less about, what are the actual issues that you're going to be able to address, and what is your position on certain ways that PwC is or isn't growing.
Or do you even know what they do?
That's very true.
I mean, I'm sorry, but there's certain
basic,
people that,
right.
It's like they don't even, so one of the things I was going to announce tonight or today was last Thursday or Friday, the GOP Cumberland County sent an email to about 50,000 people saying that the Republican Candidates Resource Center, of which I'm one of the founders, is now, quote, a trusted partner of the CCGOP. Okay. Shit, I totally lost my train of thought. Holy shit. I got to stop doing that.
It'll come back.
Go
Yep,
ahead,
it's
guys.
gone. It's
Yeah,
gone.
yeah, it's
Okay.
gone. It's gone.
So we had a great time in France, didn't we, Mario?
Oui.
So what? The safety. What other? I'll say. What else is in the vision?
Yeah,
what else is like? What other meat and potatoes do you have?
The next biggest one has everything to do with our young professionals here in this community. Fayetteville has suffered from the brain drain, like many neighboring communities, and we shouldn't be. We've got all the ingredients. We've got the Fayetteville State University. We've got Methodist University. We've got FTCC. There's no excuse for these young people who've got educations and degrees that command high salaries not to have viable career options here in the city of Fayetteville. Unfortunately, there's this vicious cycle of young people, again, being very much 1 foot out the door. I know I was when I was growing up here, heading to Raleigh, heading to Charlotte, heading to Atlanta.
Where they can make considerably more money.
Yeah, exactly right. It's not only in the career aspect, but in quality of life aspects. And so, what can we do to break that cycle? Because, of course, if the big employers are doing their research on the city of Fayetteville, and they cannot say that there's even this many necessary college graduates for us to warrant an investment here. Or even if we're going to bring the workforce, does that workforce have the things that they know that their employees are going to expect, quality of life features in that city? And if we can't answer those questions, we're going to continue to lag behind other metropolitan cities in the state of North Carolina. So we have all of the ingredients. My goodness, Fort Bragg alone, all these guys coming out with top secret clearances. And,
they got it.
And world-class training. We've got no excuse to not have the strongest argument for these IBMs, for these Apples, for these large corporate entities to want to headquarter here. And I think the way I'm going to try and make a difference is by reminding our community that we want you here, young folks, young professionals. Again, I'm kind of just speaking from my own personal testimony here. I grew up and didn't feel like Fayetteville cared if I came or went. I didn't have that sense of hometown pride like I know a lot of my friends did when it came to Raleighwood or the Bull City in Durham or Chapel Thrill. I mean, they had all these sort of
and then we get Fayetteville.
That's right.
It's like, what? Come on.
Well, but okay, so
just to wrap up that thought is just I want people to fall in love with this city because in my mind that's going to be the difference maker in you deciding that I actually want to root here. I actually want to start my business here. I want to start my family here, and then those opportunities will come to the city. Yes, sir.
An event center downtown would have gone a long way for some sprinkles on top of that. So what I was getting at with the resource center,
go ahead.
You found it.
Train of thought is that we got announced as a trusted partner, but also one of the requirements for you as a candidate or you as a candidate to work with us. Now we're going to take your money. That's number one.
Of course.
But you have to agree to certain things. We vet you, background check. If you claim military service, DD 214.
Sure, absolutely.
I mean, we've all had an example of that, God rest his soul, but also, do you have knowledge of the office of which you seek? These are all things in our brochure. And then there's a thing like, well, do you even have $1,500 to rub together? Like you gotta, if you're going to be in the game, you got to be in the game.
That's right.
Okay. But why don't we start vetting the people that are on these boards and commissions?
We're
Because
supposed to be.
Well, and I know it's always been kind of a good old boy type of thing at the county. So when the boys took office in December, they actually put a halt to all the people that were nominated for county boards because that process was nothing more than on the clerk's wall. And if a commissioner happened to walk by and saw like a friend or whatever, let's put them on there. That was it. So they are trying to formalize it much more like Fayetteville had, because Fayetteville's is light years ahead of the county. But you gotta, if you want to participate, yes, there's a learning curve, but you should know what that board
you
does.
should be able to bring
stormwater,
something to the table.
You should know what stormwater is. If you want human relations, you need to know that it's not DEI. So anyway, but I just had to.
No,
you have to vet these people better than Okay, yeah, just be on the
Well,
board.
and supposedly, we're supposed to have council liaisons to these boards, and therefore there should be sort of another sort of supervisory eyeball.
Yeah.
Which
on
one's
it.
yours? Which one do you have?
So I was not given any because, of course, sometimes the city council members also have to curtail favor in order to get some choice appointments. So that was not me.
Well, I don't know who
unfortunately.
our human relations is, but they never show up.
No, exactly right. I think that's typically true.
Although Assistant City Manager Phelps has been present at the last probably half dozen
right.
meetings. So
And nothing stops anyone from
Yeah.
just attending, but certainly there's supposed to be liaisons to these boards. I mean, the Millennial Advisory Commission has one, certainly PwC has one, and I can keep going down the list. But the point is also, in my mind, and this will be, in a future Benevente administration, the expectation is that you're also kind of vetting who's on the board. Are
Absolutely.
you seeing them actually be productive? Because if a board is not being productive, then we're wasting staff resources.
Yes.
Putting together this occasion that we're not getting the benefit. The juice is not worth the squeeze.
Yep.
And we've got to get to doing that because. I'm sure at some point we'll talk about the budget, but we haven't, in my opinion, done anywhere near the level of diligence we need to reduce the number of things that the city is doing. When things get expensive, when property values are as high as they are, it's our duty to say what perhaps we could live without, whether that means human relations, whether that means some other departments that, again, a general, average, everyday citizen of Fayetteville would not look left and right and notice that it was
Yeah.
gone. But it does make a difference at their tax bill at the end of the year if we're not expending all these additional resources for something that, again, I'm not sure any of us are getting anything in return for. So there's some process improvements that could actually result in some budgetary improvements if we actually sort of vetted them
If you actually
appropriately.
looked.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you took some heat about you weren't at a certain meeting or whatever. I want you explain that to me
Yeah,
sufficiently.
gladly,
So tell
gladly.
me, because you just weren't showing up to any meetings or whatever,
No,
and
no,
it
no,
was a
no.
whole big thing. So go ahead and tell us
we,
what
we
the
have
dope
a
was.
large number of meetings ahead of the budget, right? Because the expectation is that before June 30th, we've got to pass this thing. So outside of our regular meetings, we have essentially mini work sessions just on the issues of the budget. And there was one particular budget meeting where this is the thing about people upset with government is that folks who are retired or sort of live off a non-traditional sort of means of income don't have to be at work at a certain time. I don't have a boss, but the judge is pretty much in authority over me.
Yeah.
And
And you
so-
do have to be there.
And I do have to
You
be in
cannot
there
not
for
show
it.
up.
So I
And
didn't
so
know
at
you
10
were
a.m.
actively
meeting.
practicing though now. So what kind of
Yes.
law are you practicing? I meant to ask you
So
that.
criminal defense, and we take clients that come in through the door, obviously for issues of family law,
Okay.
and of course we're on a lot of court-appointed lists. So that's where my juvenile
Okay.
practice
Okay.
comes into play. The public defender's office often overflows with cases, and those will then get assigned to private attorneys. So I do a number of cases in DSS court, as well as juvenile court, and of course criminal court.
Now you began your practice though when you took office the first time. You weren't in practice.
No,
were
I
you?
was actually just
So-
graduated from law school, still
Okay.
haven't sat for
Yeah.
the bar exam just yet
Okay.
either.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you were.
I
so
remember
you
that, yeah.
in the last 4 years now? How long has it been since you've been in office?
Yeah, about 3.5.
3.5.
4.
Okay, because you had that one pygmy term that was like what
That's
9
right.
months
That's
or
right.
something.
That's why I say half.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly
Okay. Yeah, I
right.
wasn't sure what practice you had built, but I'm
No,
glad.
that's exactly right.
I heard your name through some guardian ad litem people. They saw your name on,
Yes,
on a
indeed,
case or two.
indeed.
So,
Yeah, that's very true. And so, when it came to a particular 10 a.m. meeting, which again is not always easy for folks
Working
that work
people.
in 9 to
Yeah.
5 to be able to get to.
And court goes in session at what time?
At 9,
Yeah, yeah.
8:30 in some courtrooms, and so it was fine. I didn't feel like I missed out on anything except what was, I think, by some council members, they kind of bragged about this being the best meeting they ever had. Well, when you find out what actually happened in that meeting, it was quite the Christmas shopping list that they had put together. The city manager gives us a budget in April that is balanced, and it's up to us at that point to say whether we are going to add or subtract from that balanced budget that he's given us. And in a year where you heard so many citizens say, hey guys, the revaluation has made my property value double, and in some cases triple the price. And I don't know what I'm going to do on my fixed income at the end of the year if my $1,000 tax bill becomes a $3,000 a year tax bill. And I don't think we took that issue seriously enough, because at no point did we spend any of those meetings talking about ripping a page out of that balanced budget to bring it down even further than the 6 cents above revenue neutral that our city manager had recommended to us. In fact, all we ended up doing was adding close to $15 million worth of additions. And there was this sort of odd patting of the back when people were like, well, we really asked for close to 30 million. So now we only ultimately added 15.
So we're supposed to be happy we spent less than we really wanted
Well, and
to.
I wonder what the domino effect is going to be, because like I got people in my church,
Sure.
their tax bill is tripled, fixed income, they will stand to lose their homes.
Well,
I mean,
and this is the scariest part. It's the folks, and Peter, I'm sure you can speak to this too from your own experience in your practice, in your business. The folks whose property was valued originally less than 100K are the ones who saw the biggest jumps.
Yep.
The folks who are closer on the opposite end of the bell curve, if you will, are seeing the more nominal 5
Right.
to 10%.
Well, and we discussed that overall, the averages are telling us 83% for homes, 22 or 23% for commercial, or was it 83 overall? I can't remember. There was 3
overall.
numbers. It was
60 overall.
Okay, so it was 83, 22, and then 60 for
Overall.
the whole.
Correct.
But the ones that were at the lower end, $75,000, $100,000 houses, did see a dollar amount way above 83%.
That's absolutely
But
right.
this is the fallacy that our city government has put out, and this is city management to be held responsible, I believe. That, this is the lowest tax rate we have in 30 years.
yeah, but that's, I mean,
But unless you math,
That's
yeah.
right.
it's not lower.
Yeah.
You're going to pay more dollar.
100%.
And now, look, I think with the work you all have done, you came pretty close to revenue neutral,
We
which
were 6 cents over.
6 cents over. And I think I remarked on Saturday that, well, yeah, that's better than Hope Mills going like, what,
It is,
30
it
cents?
is, but we could have been as low as 2 cents over had we not gone shopping.
Okay.
And that was my big concern, and that's why I kind of got, I feel like some and I've got to get used to this, the unfair criticism that I wasn't at the meeting where they went shopping. No, I wasn't at that meeting, but I'm also not impressed by what I saw from the minutes of that meeting, because I had confirmation from our assistant city manager over finances who confirmed. At no point did the city of Fayetteville ever have a meeting where we discussed cutting the budget. The closest we got, if you can even call it that, is that instead of spending over $25 million in additional spending, we only agreed to $15 million in additional spending.
What
to me,
kind
that's not
of-
a budget cut.
No,
What
it's not.
What kind of projects was something just purely added, or we just expanded some programs?
Well, and so that's the other frustrating thing, is that in all instances that I can recall seeing that of note, we're essentially, and again, you can kind of argue this in a couple of different directions. If the city manager is saying that we can do $500,000 worth of sidewalk projects in the next 12 fiscal months, because that's all this budget is meant for, but you want to really sound like the sidewalk guy, and you demand that we put $1 million for sidewalks, our city manager kind of has to, look left and right and say, do a majority of you really want to do that? I just explained to you that by the, just availability of contractors and our ability to cut out, the paperwork, we're only going to get to about $500,000 worth of projects. You can encumber $1 million if you want. We're not going to get to it, buddy, in the next 12 fiscal months.
That's
even
a lot
if we
of
wanted to.
that's a lot of sidewalk.
That's a lot.
And it's great that we're doing it, and I would love to have more, but we have to also think about what is technically possible. I think some people were upset about that too when it came to freezing some funding for our law enforcement, but our chief of police could literally say every time that we host a recruitment period and we go through the basic law enforcement training, we have about 40 guys come in, guys and gals, and we yield about half of that, because for some reason or another, some folks drop out,
right.
things happen. So if we only host 2 to 3 basic law enforcement trainings in a given 12 fiscal year period, you can only really expect about 45 new hires.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense for us to budget for 80 officers,
Yeah.
even though we're low 80, but for us to budget more than 45.
Okay,
is
so
not
instead of
actually
paring
possible.
back what we're allocating in the budget to the City of Fayetteville Police, we went ahead and funded empty positions. So that's a problem in the commission. So at the county level, the sheriff has about an equal number of sheriff's deputies short. And that's the conflict now at the
You're onto
county
something,
budget
Peter.
meeting.
Yep,
Well, I
yeah.
mean, look, if you need it, ask for it.
Yeah.
But it's like we don't.
But if
wanna
you
come
can't
back
utilize
and
it, and
If
that's
it's not
one of
physically
the
possible.
yeah.
But here's the thing: what if they can utilize it someplace else?
Well, I mean,
That's the problem. Now, does
It
that
is.
stuff get earmarked just for salary, or do they get some discretion inside the department?
It depends on how we say it, right?
Okay.
And certainly you're absolutely right that if it's just to the department, it can go to a lot of things.
Yeah.
It,
Right.
It doesn't have to necessarily go just to salaries or just to
but if it's
hiring.
recruitment, then it's got to be recruitment
If it's
specific.
said that way, right? So that is what we did when it came to. We were very, very specific and detailed when we said this much has to go to addressing compression. And the whole concept of compression is that somebody who got hired in 2025 on day one is making a lot more than the guy who got hired
Sure.
on day one 5 years ago. I mean, that's just the nature of, you know, competitive salaries.
Yep.
But this guy's been here 5 years. He's like, hey, the rookie just
Right,
is
right.
getting paid more than me.
Yeah,
What's
yeah.
up? So we made an adjustment for that compression issue, we call it. So, so we can get folks who've been here with us longer a bump in their rate, so that they're not sort of at the same place that the new
rookie
guy
is. Yep.
Exactly
Sure.
right. So in that way, we did make some specific earmarks for it. You know, but you made a great point, Peter. I think a lot of times people forget that the budget in so many ways is aspirational. We want to get to all of these things, but over the course of 12 months, life happens. You know, tariffs happen, right? I mean, just, you know, people wanting to work or not take on our contracts happens.
Well, I wonder if there's even a metric out there for saying, well, we just raised the taxes. What's the likelihood of how many more are going to go to foreclosure and be unpaid?
Yep.
I wonder if it's going to, I don't know if it'll be statistically like significant.
I don't know if you'll be able to
hurt our budget.
I don't know if you'll be able to quantify it like that.
Well, I'm sure every time they revalue and it goes up, there's some percentage that they see a spike in foreclosures or whatever.
Well, I think they're going to see. I think they're going to.
I don't know if they're going to see enough to really make them have to go back to the budget.
You're talking about people making under 100K, man.
Oh, I get it.
You know, you're talking about a lot of people, and again, a lot of them fixed incomes, whether we're talking retirees or disabled.
That's
you know, it's one of those things. I think it could really affect our housing.
Agreed.
I mean, it's doing it already, right? Just inflation alone, cost of goods alone is doing that to people. And then for us to kind of hit them one more time on the way out at the end of the year, I mean, what are you doing to folks? And I asked for that information. I asked for that data because if it meant us dialing the dial down even further than 6 cents, because that's what it was going to take to reach those people. We know that we're going to reach some people, right? We said that overall it's about really an 80% increase. We only dialed down our tax rate 22% in response to that 80%.
Yeah.
So we didn't go the full revenue.
It's also, see, and that's the problem with the rank and file citizen that, look, most people are trying to live and work and take care of their families. They don't have time to dig into this to the nature we are. And yeah, it sounds good. Lowest tax rate. But then they get their bill and they're like,
what in the world? And I think if we had set a goal of even 60%, just because 50 something where I'm not going to see a triple percentage, increase in my tax bill. And that's what people see.
And to me, that was my starting point, and you would have to convince me otherwise.
That's it.
I want to see a budget that's so anemic that we can kill it.
Yeah.
Government should be the size of something that we can step on and not the other way around. And I feel like there's plenty built in. There's plenty of capacity in there that we certainly could have maybe meet in the middle.
And there's always this argument that every year we have another opportunity to reevaluate, right? So if we did a revenue neutral and people kind of felt the tightening of the belt and they were like, wait a second, actually I relied on that bus route or I relied on this or that, then we can make an upward adjustment, but it's one that makes sense and that we can see the difference. And that's the part that I sometimes wish, just like you said, Peter, that a lot of folks aren't paying attention to it because they're sort of insulated from it. And part of me feels like, I think we have a responsibility to let people see it for themselves. If we have a revenue neutral budget like you asked for, you might start to see, a few places that you're missing out on maybe some city service. Maybe we don't do loose leaf collection this year, right? Yeah. Now you like loose leaf collection, don't you? So maybe we want to go up a penny on that next year. But I sell you on exactly what service I'm providing you. We want to do more about litter. Well, we're only spending this much, and now you're seeing a little bit more of it. You're seeing some hedges grow a little bit, on the medians more than you want to. Well, that was what we cut.
Yeah.
Can you spend a couple bucks on the app because I requested a brown container like 9 months ago and never got it. But then when I called solid waste, the young lady was super sweet, and I had it the next day delivered for like $1,000. No.
It's 50.
85 or 50, whatever.
Yeah,
with delivery for the snobs of us, it was another $2,500.
Got there.
But no, I like the idea of the app. Any citizen can narc on the other. But
it's a good start.
I think I'll make one last prophecy, right? And that is, I don't think that we will see the level of foreclosures increase before that next budget because annual, and a lot of people that are in that income bracket, they don't pay PITI.
Sure.
They get their tax bill at the end of the year.
That's right.
I think it's going to take probably a year and a half before it really affects our residents.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So, a couple of last things before I let you out of here.
Yes,
I know
you
have
I'm
you got
good, man.
really. Did you get rained out some of these meetings? You think?
I think I'm just having a good time.
Okay. So what is your favorite political movie or TV show?
Movie or TV show?
Political, though.
Yeah, the political ones.
Justified. Oh, wait, that's kind of political.
I feel like there's...
It's politics.
Thank You for Smoking, I think, was one that
Love
I
it.
really enjoyed.
Okay.
I use that chocolate ice cream illustration sometimes with folks. He does this thing where he's teaching his son about, how to have a political argument. And he says, okay, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream? He says, vanilla or chocolate. He says, okay, tell me why chocolate. And he gives him all these great reasons why he likes chocolate. And then he says, okay, my turn. Now, I want an ice cream flavor for every person. He's the one trying to limit you to chocolate. I think, so
Yeah.
just, kind of takes advantage of the argument and says, you don't have to take a stance. And it was just really a lot of funny illustrations in that movie.
Yep.
So I think about that one. That comes to mind first.
I like when the kid argues with his mom about going with dad, and dad says, "How did you convince her?" He says, "She was having a discussion. I was having an argument."
Yeah.
Like he gets in the car. So that's definitely got to be an attorney. You guys like that one?
I think that might be
from
true.
the attorney standpoint, y'all like to argue a little bit. So
that's right.
Parting words. So you've got a campaign to run. You've already announced. Go ahead and give us your website and give us your
MarioB.com. You can find us online if you want to sign. We've got about 1,500 of them delivered last week, so they're going to be all over the city of Fayetteville. We're taking this incredibly seriously. I guess there's room on the bandwagon, guys. Come on, hop aboard. We're taking this race very seriously, y'all. We want to make sure that public safety is getting a real comprehensive approach taken towards it. We want a cure for crime here in the city of Fayetteville. When it comes to our making the city, taken to the next level, we need our next generation leaders to stick around, our young professionals to stick around, because we know that there has been all this hard work put in by our stalwarts that have been around for generations, but they need reinforcements. They need to be supported, and it's our turn now to finally step up and provide exactly what the city needs. And then, of course, we didn't get a chance to talk about this much, but I do think it's a part of making us a more regional area is our public transportation. I can't tell you guys how many people are flooding that Cumberland County Courthouse because of traffic compliance issues. And I know that if you're making the decision between going to work or picking up your kids or driving behind the wheel of a vehicle that you don't have insurance or registration on, you're going to work, you're going to pick up your kids. That's what keeps happening here in this city. But what if we had an alternative option? What happens if our transportation system was so robust that we were almost like Washington, D.C., where it's like a shuttle service, basically. There's so many buses going back and forth. It'll have a huge impact, I think, on connecting our young people to our downtown, to the mall area. I want an express route from Fayetteville State and Methodist straight downtown and then straight to the mall so that these young people can get around without having to use a car. Because we know in Fayetteville, it almost feels like that. If you don't have a car, you can't get anywhere.
Yep.
So I want to see us get to that point. I don't think we can do that in the next 5 to 10 years, but we've got to start now if we ever want to get there. So, having a much more robust public transportation system is a huge passion of mine as well, because I think it addresses issues of public safety, issues of the economy, and again, gives people an opportunity to really fall in love with the city because they can actually get around it. So check out MarioB.com. Feel free to reach out anytime. I give out my phone number, guys. Feel free to text me, call me. We can talk, 910-551-5659. I'd love to get to know exactly what is going to take you to the ballot booth in November and see how we can incorporate that into our platform.
All right. With that, Mario B., candidate for City Council, Mayor of Fayetteville. So looking forward to seeing how that progresses.
Yeah, thank you, brother.
So thank you to my on-air cabinet member, Pastor Josh. Thank you for being here always, my
and
rock.
Our absent cabinet
And over
members.
here, I'm pointing off camera to our producer, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
So to our audience, I hope you do us a favor and take time this week to visit one of our commercial sponsors and let them know you heard their message right here on the Carolina Cabinet. If you do somehow miss an episode of our top-rated show, you can find us on your favorite podcast broadcaster, Apple, Spotify, Google.
We're everywhere.
We're everywhere. Come on, guys. Look for us online at thecarolinacabinet.com. You can find all our videos and links. Thanks again for tuning in this morning. So until next time, we are
the Carolina Cabinet.